Friends, before we get into this episode, I just want to give out a short little announcement. We just dropped 3 Fresh Harvest Colombians. They're lovely coffees. And yes, today, that's the day that the episode airs. There's a Pink Bourbon, a Colombia varietal that's naturally processed by Francie, as well as our very first geisha. And if you've been around the podcast for a little bit, you know we've been holding back from dropping a geisha. So this is a very exciting weekend for us. It is a stunning coffee. It's an anaerobic washed, processed by Wilder Lasso. And if you've been around the coffee industry for a little bit, you know that name is very, very familiar. Wilder Lasso is a legendary producer. He's been crushing it for years and years, producing probably some of the tastiest coffees coming out of Colombia. We're releasing this coffee with a lot of excitement. Any 3 of those coffees will rock your world. Like, we are pumped about this new menu. However, I am biased towards that geisha. So pick up a bag for yourself, enjoy the coffees, and yeah, enough yapping. Let's get into this episode. What is good, everyone? Thank you so much for joining us on another tasty episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. This is kind of part 1 of our leveling up series. We did an intro to the series last time, and this is kind of a step into the series, which is going to be all focused around how do you level up as a barista, which should be exciting. And for this series, we're trying to go as practical as possible so that anyone and everyone who listens to it can be like, cool, I have some practical things that I could do literally like this week to start the leveling up process. So if you haven't watched the intro to the series from last week, go check that out. In addition, one other thing, a few episodes ago, we talked about how we are thinking about doing like a dial-in batch to a small group of people who are interested. In other words, we sometimes, when we're dialing in new coffees, there is oftentimes a batch that is pretty much nearly dialed in, but because we don't have, labels printed, because we're not ready to launch it, we can't sell it, but the coffee's like pretty much there. And so this is, I mean, we love drinking it. We try to drink it, but 5-6 pounds of a few coffees is a little too much for us. So what we mentioned was we want to be able to have an option where you can buy a bag of coffee that has no labels, no nothing. It's just the bag of goods. It'll be heavily discounted, and probably be very small quantity because it'll be like a batch, which is not that big. So a handful of you guys reached out to us on Instagram, and seriously, I'm so pumped that so many of you have been interested in that. So we don't have any right now, but as we get new coffees over the next couple months, stay tuned on the podcast. We'll announce it, and we'll show you guys how to order that, and it'll be pretty kind of exclusive, low key drop just for podcast listeners and a few subscribers. So
no, that's super good idea. Plus, that's the batch that we normally get our flavor notes from for the bag for the labels.
Exactly.
So it's a good batch to have. It's like the OG batch number, quote unquote, unofficial one. I think it's a good idea. I think it's fun, and plus it could create some dialogue around people talking about the roast, talking about what we do and all that without the coffee actually being dropped. And I think that's always fun.
And I know I mentioned it to you. We were just kind of talking about maybe even potentially doing like a recorded video or live video of even just us cupping through the coffee and talking about it, how we can improve it and stuff like that. So it's a little more interesting than just getting an unlabeled bag.
Totally.
Even though it'll cut our costs and waste, it'll give you guys some discounted tasty treats, and everybody's happy.
It can almost be like an exclusive episode, like an unlisted podcast episode.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's it. Like this kind of format, everything. Leave the cupping bowls, because normally we cup before these episodes.
That's true.
So just leave those cupping bowls and be like, hey, what did we taste? It would be very, very easy for us to do. It would almost be like a double podcast day. 100%. And one is exclusive, just sent out, whatever, via email or subscription. And the other one is live.
That would actually be, that's actually not a terrible idea. And we can even just leave the bowls out here, even just
slurp.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's exciting. But that being said, let's roll right into the episode.
Yep.
And one last announcement. Friends, we have broken 1,000 Spotify followers.
Wow.
Which is
incredible.
Which, it's not Joe Rogan out here, but but I'll take it. 1,000 followers on Spotify.
Where are streams at?
Streams, to be honest, I have no idea. It's like 60, 70K plus.
Okay, that's nice.
So
that's on one platform. That's
on one platform. So if you're listening to the podcast, you've been a listener. Hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you're at. And if you're like an exceptional person, and I know we have a whole fan base of exceptional people, leave a review, leave a little 5-star review, write a cute little comment for us. We read those. It would just really help the podcast and just reaching more people. So anyways, enough with that. Let's sip on some Batchy.
Solid. Can't complain. Absolutely stunning. It's a great coffee.
It's a nicely dialed batch.
Yeah.
Wow.
12.7. Or 11.7.
11.7.
Sorry.
So quite a bit coarser. As this coffee.
11.7.
Cool. As this coffee very much so needs it. It's just very nice. What are you getting on it?
A lot of like rich stone fruit. Even like merging. Maybe I'm crazy. I do like this coffee a lot. But maybe I'm crazy because I feel like I'm tasting blackberry. Never tasted blackberry in this coffee.
No, that's not.
Brown sugar for sure.
It's not that good.
Dried fruits. Stone fruit. I'm not getting much of that chocolatiness. There's slight caramely kind of nougat thing going on, but I think it's more brown sugar than caramel.
100%.
Yeah. It's nice. Like very big coating. Like it's absolutely nice.
Orange?
Coffee. It's not that tart. If I had to I would say it's more like a dried grape, like a raisin, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's some acidity, brightness on the back end that is
maybe pomegranate.
No, stop making this coffee sound like a
ripper. It is a ripper, dude. It's so good.
Throwing out pomegranate, blackberry, sheesh.
People,
that's an Ethiopian natural right there.
If you think, okay, folks, if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I kind of take Serge's word over Mark's word, then use the discount code Serge of Coffee when you buy this coffee. It's me giving you a 15% discount.
No.
That's Serge spelled SURGE. Of coffee.
If you'd like to, if you think Sergi needs to level up his tasting,
you're gonna
drop it down in the comments and put all caps. Level up, Serge. Level up.
Or just use my discount code and buy some decaf.
It's true. Well, I will say this. It's
nice.
I mean, this batchy, if somebody really made it for me and just gave it to me blindly, I would never have said it was a decaf.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where there's usually like a lingering decaf taste that you can kind of pick up. It's kind of like pastry-ish a little bit.
Bready.
But you're not. It's pretty, I don't know if it's just covered by all the other good stuff that you're picking up on it, or it's, I don't know, somehow mellowed out, or maybe something happened in the extraction that it didn't really pull out some of those. I don't know.
Yeah.
But honestly,
it's great.
Yeah.
I want to pull this on espresso, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a ripper.
Yeah. I was just not expecting. I was like,
so good.
So just like, yo, what are we brewing on the pot? I'm like, kind of just throw the decaf on there. And I'm like, whoa, okay.
Some of our last roasts of the decaf, I've been so hyped on it. I've been posting them on the gram because I'm like, dude, like this coffee just roasted so smoothly, so nicely, 2-dial. It was just so good. I like it a lot.
It's nice. Yeah. Well, cool. So you want to kick us off with leveling up as a barista?
Yeah. One of the things to keep in mind for everyone listening is the intro episode kind of drew and set up a outline to have how I want to engage this concept of leveling up. That's key. But before we even dive into those three things, which is curiosity, education, and experimentation, before we dive into those, because those will get, like you said, hopefully, like you can apply this tonight, you can apply this tomorrow morning, you can apply this instantly. Mm-hmm. But I think one thing worth mentioning is overall, if you are in a place, you're a barista and you want to level up, you're like, okay, you're getting antsy, you're getting kind of bored. I get that a lot. One, I've managed a lot of cafes and I get that question a lot. Like, hey, I'm kind of getting bored. And usually the follow-up to that is, I'm kind of getting bored. I'm thinking about doing something else. Mm-hmm. And which is okay. Like when people want to go do another career, I've had that happen. That's fine. I get it. Like people, but if you're super passionate about coffee and the only reason you want to go quote unquote do something else is because coffee feels limiting, like you kind of went to the extreme, you are at the very top. If that's what you think, this is what I would challenge. I would say stick it out, stay in the game. Patience is the game itself. So before you decide to move on, before you decide to quit, before you decide to kind of give up because coffee is quote unquote getting kind of boring for you, or you're not being stimulated enough, I would say don't quit, stay in the game and stay consistent, because in order to level up, patience and putting in the work, which we'll be talking about what does that look like practically, is going to take time. Leveling up doesn't happen after 3 months of being on bar. You're still learning stuff. Like embrace that. You're actually leveling in the process of leveling up. So because you've like, okay, I can, pull a shot of espresso, pour some latte art, and I kind of understand how to make a pour over, doesn't mean you need to quit. But I think I resonate with the idea of like being in a place where you're kind of like antsy. So I'm not going to cancel that out. Does that kind of make sense as a overall, this is how we want to start, is to have that mentality.
The biggest thing that can keep you from leveling up is if A, you want overnight success, mm-hmm. which is probably not going to happen. And then B, also having this mindset that something needs to happen right away, or not being committed simultaneously for the long run. Yeah. Like I always kind of have to try to remind myself with a lot of things, especially when I get antsy and I'm like, why isn't this happening? Why am I not better? Why am I this? Mm-hmm. It's like, it would not be fun if you peaked in life, at like 30 years old.
Yeah. Fair.
That means it's all downhill from there.
That's what happened to me, dude.
No. It's like, if you like
my fastest mile was when I was 30.
Really?
Yeah. No joke. It was it was sub 5. It was like 4:57.
That's pretty speedy.
Yeah.
That's pretty
like 4:57 to 5:15. Yeah. I was 30. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So it's like, it would be unfortunate if you like joined the coffee game and you worked behind bar in 2 years and then you're like, well, it's all downhill from here. Like I've literally mastered everything. And I think especially in coffee, there's a lot of things that are kind of still undefined. Mm-hmm. And I think how the industry, through my perspective, how the industry is set up, it can feel like within a year or two, you feel like, cool, you can dial in, you can pour some latte art. Yeah. What more could I do? Right. And I think there's many different variables that play into it, but I'm just saying that, hey, no, even when it feels like there's not a whole lot more room or space or ceiling space for you to grow. No, there is. It just means that you have to get creative. You have to kind of look outside the box and, know that there's actually more to grow.
I think when you said that, it reminded me of when I lived in Jacksonville. I love Bold Bean. Like you and I went to Bold Bean, love Bold Bean. So there was a barista at Bold Bean, April. And one of the things that always intrigued me about April was the way she held her composure, the way she presented herself behind bar. It's not the hard skills of coffee. It's the quote unquote more or less the soft skills, the presentation, the being calm and collected kind of attitude. And I think that's one of the things that maybe we'll touch on is like when you want to take things to the next level is recognize that it's not always the very hard skill that takes you to the next level. It's not about how well you dialed in a coffee, even though that's crucial, that's important.
Yes.
You'll figure that out. Like I can guarantee you, if there's someone listening to the podcast and they're like, I don't know how to dial in coffee, do it for 3 months and you're going to get the hang of it, you know? But the other side of this, it's like, man, when you walk into a cafe and you see the barista just completely flowing, like in the zone, like the vibes are there, the energy is there. You can see things are moving quick, but the demeanor is like this, like calm, collected, presented. Mm-hmm. I mean, that levels up the hospitality game. Yeah. Outside of just the bar game, right? So that's a little caveat to before we dive in. It's like, hey, you want to level up, focus on that little thing because that makes hospitality so much better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what came to mind for me is like the difference between like playing with, you know, if you're like an intermediate musician mm-hmm. and you're playing with, you know, a new group of people, it's like you might be able to play a few things, but when you play with like your buddies that you play with all the time, there's like, you're in the pocket. There's a groove and you're like, there's like a vibe that happens when everybody's just locked in, but you know, it's kind of hard to be locked in when you're like still
figuring it out. Yeah.
You know, freaking out about small things or somebody, you know, something wrong, something small that went wrong and that all of a sudden threw you off. That's all part of being like a really good barista.
But little inside joke. Remember when we used to film the Christmas special? And remember that one dude playing the bass? I know. Dude, that guy has leveled up. Yes. Like the way he played the bass was just like smooth as butter, dude. Like
just oozing out of him.
Dude, that makes me feel different things. That was excellent, dude.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think with that, so you're in the game, you're committed to the game, and you want to take it to the next level. One of the question is like, how do you be curious, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the key to curiosity? And I think there's a little tweak to mentality that happens when you're curious. You stop treating your barista role as just simply a job. Mm-hmm. You're coming on bar, you're dialing in coffees, you're serving drinks, and there's something that clicks that's not about the paycheck anymore. It's about the fact that you just love what you do. Mm-hmm. That's why you're in the pocket. You're passionate about this, and the attitude shifts to like, okay, like I actually want to do this. That in itself will shift you in a space where you start asking, wondering, looking at things in a whole different way. So before it was just like, okay, how can I get training so I can execute to get paid? Now you're asking the question is like, how can I understand why I got this training? Like, how can I understand the ideas of dialing in espresso, dialing in a new coffee to a level to where like, hey, it used to take me 5 shots to dial in this coffee. How can I dial it in 2 or 3? Mm-hmm. And that kind of practicality, like that takes work. That takes commitment. You have to do the extra hours. It reminds me of like our buddy Justin. Dude, Justin, elite barista here. Like insanely good dude too. So, and very good looking too, like, and very single right now, as far as I know. But he would do his shift. He'd crush out an 8-hour floor shift, which to all baristas, we know what an 8-hour floor shift feels like, especially when you have to close. And then bring in his milk, bring in his coffee, and start pouring latte art and just crushing. And one of Justin's main statements has been like, that has potential. And I love that. I make fun of him. I always make fun of him for that because I'm like, dude, that did not have potential. Like, dude, that was absolutely whack. But what I liked about that is the fact that he was always like, okay, I figured this little caveat out in pouring. I need to practice more. I need to put in the time. I need to come into the shop before and after hours. I need to put in the work because he does have skill. He does have talent. And sometimes baristas just want to bank on their talent without putting in the work. Mm-hmm. And what I'm saying is like, in order to level up with that commitment of staying in the game, you have to put in the work after hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's that what you said about it stops being as much of a paycheck as it becomes a like just something you want to do and want to excel at. I think that's when if you're feeling that, if your barista job has gone from just being about making a paycheck to actually excelling at your craft, just know that is a very good signal that you are, there's something there. You are gonna, like, you're on the right path, you're on the right trajectory to being like an exceptional barista. And that's with like everything. You know, it's the difference between, you know, being just being a photographer, just being a creative of some sort, just to get paid because that's just your job, versus like the person who's doing it outside of their work hours, outside of, you know, in their free time. The person who's just going out in the extra mile is always going to run laps around somebody who's just like, all right, I'm just here just because I need to get paid. Therefore, I'm going to, I guess, try to get better, see what I can do. Like, you might get better, but man, the person like Justin is always going to just be improving at such significant, level. You know, paces and at a whole different level. And that also, that's also another signal to you of like whether or not this is your thing or not. Yeah, totally. And again, we're talking, just so everybody knows, we're talking about like leveling up to be exceptional. When you think about leveling up and being exceptional, a lot of the things that you do don't make logical sense, and you actually, I think that becomes the priority, is being exceptional, not necessarily other things. So even though it's gonna be easy to say, well, you know, my boss didn't tell me to do it. You know, I'm not getting paid to go watch a YouTube video, which we'll get into. Like, I'm not getting paid to learn how to dial in better. Like, okay, great. You've just set your standard. You've agreed in yourself that this is the playing field, that the playing field that you're on. That's it. But when we're just talking about how do you be freaking amazing at what you do, it's going to take some obsession. It's going to take going beyond just like, this is a job. It's the difference between how do I keep my job versus how do I excel in my job. And that there's a fine line, because if you notice the key word there, it's still a job. It's still something you do, quote unquote, for money. That doesn't change, but it's the mentality to where you're like, okay, what do I need to do to make sure I'm not getting fired tomorrow? Like, how good or bad of my clothes can I do just to get out on time? You know, versus like, okay, like, I want to figure out what's the best way to do this clothes. Like, I want to figure out what's the best way to do these dishes. Like, I want to figure out what's the best way to fold these towels. Or a better question is like, why do we fold towels this way? And it's that kind of stuff, that kind of minute stuff that actually levels you up. And those little twists in mentality between how do I just do what I need to keep my job versus how can I excel in my job will reveal like, hey, are you actually passionate about this? Are you actually patient? Are you staying in the game? And practically, like, how many times have you seen people dial in coffees on bar and they're like, oh, sick. Like, I hit my parameters, 17 in, you know, maybe 40 out, 25 seconds, it's dialed, you know? And then sometimes they pull a shot that's like completely whack, like 17 in, you know, 40 out, and then it's a 32-second shot. And what most of the time happens, you just toss that shot and ignore that shot in the dial because it's so out of range. I will periodically and quite often, I will taste that shot to this day. Do I know it's probably out of dial? Well, yeah. But there are times when I'm completely surprised about what does this espresso taste super over extracted? Or what does this espresso taste outside of my understanding of what the range should be for this espresso? And those are the kind of practical things. Like, if you're on bar, I would highly challenge every barista. It's like, don't neglect the super bad shots, but give them a little taste to be like, oh, that's what a quote unquote bad shot tastes like. It's a reminder, and it's a frame of reference now.
I mean, I maybe don't need, I've been dialing coffees for so many years, but I still periodically do that just for kicks, you know, because it helps me. It encourages me, inspires me to keep dialing in espresso.
Yeah. These are some of the things, like, you might be listening, you're like, man, do I really have to obsess over, you know, the towels or the shot or all these little things? I mean, I get it. It's not flashy. It's not fun. It's not cute. It's not romantic. It's the stuff that's going to be a little more exhausting, a little more tiring. It's going to be the stuff that nobody sees. It's going to be the stuff that nobody might acknowledge. But again, when you can flip that framework to being, no, I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing this for the grand scheme of me being good at my craft. That is your reward, is that.
Yeah.
Your reward is when you can show up and crush either at the latte art throwdown. Your reward is when you know that when you're on bar, things run flawlessly.
Yeah.
Like that's the reward that you get. It might not be a raise.
Yeah.
But that's the reward that you get. And I'm telling you, people who function on that level will always crush.
Yeah. Totally.
And it's only a matter of time until the reward does come, where they get that promotion, where they get an opportunity, where somebody does acknowledge them.
Yeah.
It's that patience that is like, how long can you do this without anybody noticing your stuff? And you can just be crushing at it.
So true. That's exactly what I've seen especially in the industry, in the coffee industry. It's like a lot of the times it's people who just come in and do their job really, really well, like with attention, with detail, and they do it for a long time. Yeah. I've seen very good baristas flop shops every like year or every 6 months. I'm thinking of one right now. That person is not in a good spot when it comes to coffee. They're fine. They're cool, but they're no longer in coffee right now. Why? Well, sometimes you just have to stick around, push through, you know. Yeah. But with that said, it's like once you're actually like doing all these things, your mentality is changing, and you're trying to figure out certain elements of like maybe specifically like latte art, pulling espresso. That curiosity will always lead to education. And one of the most practical ways, most intentional ways to get education is to learn directly from someone. Whether that's your manager on the floor, on bar, whether that's just another coffee professional, whether that's another cafe, but something that you can practically step into and step with, because that kind of education where you can watch someone, like for example, I'm thinking practically, if one of my baristas is like, man, I just want to dial in coffee better. Like, can I come in and just watch you dial in? Because right now we have one barista that opens up the cafe and they dial in by themselves. Yeah. But if someone came up to me and said that, I was like, dude, that person really wants to take it to the next level. Like if you're just going to show up, you're going to wake up early in the morning, you're going to sacrifice your sleep, and you're going to show up just to watch someone else dial in and taste their coffee and watch that process. That is an education that you can't get from all the other places that we're going to mention. That you can't read that in a book, right?
You know what they say, the early bird gets the
espresso.
Yeah.
So doing that kind of extra work, that kind of education that's super practical is absolutely key.
I mean, that's yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of people.
No, I
right now.
When I'm thinking to this isn't really barista related, but man, when I used to work at Woods at my first roastery job, dude, I pestered Shay any minute I got. Literally, it was like, and he was very talkative, which was helpful because we could spend like an hour just talking about something, and I'm just like, every question I had, I just wanted to, because I was like, I have like this living legend next to me. Why would I not ask questions and try to soak in as much information and knowledge as possible? And honestly, that's a huge asset that you have. It's probably more important than all the other ones that we're going to talk about, but being surrounded around people who are just really good at what they do and legendary. I mean, the more better people than you that you can surround yourself around, it's actually going to force you and push you to start playing on their level, start doing the things that they're doing, start performing much better. It's just, I mean, it's the whole thing about like, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are or whatever.
Yeah.
It's because, I mean, like also the other quote is like, you're the collection of like the 5 closest people around you, you know, like it's kind of the same thing. Like if you surround yourself around people who are very knowledgeable and you're wanting to learn from them and just having it, just wanting, that's it. Just wanting.
Yeah.
That's a huge game changer.
Yeah. I mean, again, Justin and Nate, like when Justin moved and started working with Nate at the Everett location, Narrative, something happened to his latte art, dude. It leveled the F up. It went out. You know what I mean? He went crazy. Like everyone's like, oh, that's a Narrative top heart. Why? Because only Nate can do that. Well, not only, but Nate predominantly does that top heart. No one can rep. But then Justin starts working alongside of him. And there's a different type of education to do that. I remember when I was working at another cafe and Alex came over and we hung out at my house and we were talking coffee and I was telling him just literally like, dude, like, I just need to do more in coffee. Like I feel like super limited. And I'm like, I don't know how to do y'all style of coffee without being with y'all. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was kind of an obvious thing that I was saying like, hey, I'd like to work for Narrative at some point, but it came out of this intention of like, okay, I want to level up and you and Narrative look like leveling up to me. So how can I spend time in that space? How can I be with y'all to take my game to this level that I want to take it to?
This may not be the best thing to say, but honestly, if you're surrounded around people that either don't push you or you don't have somebody over you in leadership that is kind of pushing you to get better and you want to, sometimes the power move is to find a job at a place that have people that are much more skilled or that you want to learn from.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, but you know, it's just the reality. It's unfortunate. That's a
very practical.
But it's something that I've been I've been wanting to say about this whole episode is that like, a part of being good in management, which we'll talk about in another, I think, series, part of the series, and like giving your baristas those opportunities to grow and pushing them is such a big part. So if you're like, man, I've nothing to do here. I'm capped out, maxed out. I just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's time.
Yeah. And we've stayed on this like segment of the episode for a long time, but I don't want to forget about the fact like if you don't work in a cafe, you're a home barista and you're a home brewer, and you're like, oh, okay, like I don't have the privilege to get a cafe job right now. So how do you level up? I remember even during like the 2020 era when we weren't working in cafes, like I was consuming information from people like Jonathan Gagne. Like I was in the Patreon group, the Ad Astra, like coffee blog. Like I was in that community. I was deep in that community and investing the finances because I wanted like, how much more can I get out of this versus just reading another Daily Grind article, right?
Yeah.
So I was investing into that kind of community and those online resources that were more than just the sub-average Google, you know what I mean? It was a more of a commitment level that I could get something out of Jonathan and it gave me the opportunity to actually talk to him, ask questions about water composition, ask questions about kettle height stream, like ask questions about stuff that I had really no idea about at that point. But that online resources gave me the opportunity. And I know you're like in Discord channels, which is way more interactive than a Patreon blog, but Discord channels are also a great opportunity to kind of sit and listen. I am not in many, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I know you are. So
yeah, I think even forums, there's plenty of Facebook forums, plenty of, Discord channels. I mean, the cool thing with there is that like you can get into the same Discord as like Christopher Farron.
Yeah.
And he's literally commenting. Christopher's like legendary in the industry. To be able to learn from him or even hear what he has to say about certain things, that's huge. You're not paying for it. You're just there soaking up a bunch of knowledge. And like we've always said, like I mean, there's so many resources right now online that you can tap into, and so many communities and YouTube channels and all this stuff that, yeah, there's a lot that you can learn from.
Yeah.
But before we go on, I will say somebody's going to be a stickler and say it's not Jonathan Gagne, it's Jonathan Gagne.
Oh, maybe.
Because
he's
French.
I'm sorry, my bad.
They're going to be like, dude,
bad pronunciation.
Say his name right.
I'm always thinking of the hockey player.
Who?
Gagne. The hockey, played for the Philadelphia Flyers. I'm gonna Google this really quick. Right. I'm pretty sure. Keep talking. Say something about education and discourse. I'm gonna Google this.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really big one. But also on top of online resources, there's also some really solid barista books out there. Yeah. My buddy Slavik, who's like a home barista, we were recently talking about what?
I'm gonna touch back. It's Simon Gagne. Was a hockey player. So yes, same spelling too.
Yeah. But he has a book from James Hoffman. It's like how to make coffee or something that like goes into and talks about like water chemistry and a bunch of other really great insightful things. Yeah. I don't know. That's like really, I think also paired with that is like read something and then literally go try it out.
Yes.
Read something, go try it out.
That's exactly where we're heading.
Yeah. And like experimentation and actually trying things out is important. Like, I mean, I'm going to go even further and say like, not only do you read something, learn something on the web, go try it out for yourself, because also you should not trust everything you see on Reddit forums.
Exactly.
One of the best things I love about Lance's YouTube videos is recently he's been turning up the heat with like debunking these myths that we thought, and all the home baristas would say this is exactly how it is, and then he goes, tests it out, and that's not the case. Like that is a perfect model of what you should be doing. And even if you're like tried something out and you're like, oh well, duh, that's what they said. Cool, now you know, and then you've also gone through the process of testing and trying. That is a huge learning experience. And in the process, you might find something else.
Yeah, totally. And you approach it with humility. It's not like just because you did 2 pour overs and they didn't turn out the way this, forum or this Discord channel was saying, doesn't mean that you should automatically assume that now you're smarter because you did one experiment. Run a few experiments. Be a good freaking scientist. Make sure that you have enough data that you can actually like process. I remember one of my baristas Social Grounds would literally keep a spreadsheet of dial-in espressos and how extraction would change. I'm like, actually create some of your own data, and then process that data. And then when you have that information and you can actually ask a very pointed question, approach that question with humility and being like, hey, I want these results, but I'm doing it this way, and these are the results I'm getting. So is it my fault, or is this like not true actually? You know what I mean? 100%. So I think that's super important. Practically speaking, some of the most kind of life-changing and like altering moments in coffee experimentation was water. That changed my mind about everything. I was completely shocked. I was like, how can just, it's all water, but how can different composition in water affect extraction? So if you're new to that and you maybe used a third wave coffee water packet, perfect coffee water packet here and there, you're like, that's the right thing to do. The way you can level up is actually run some of those experiments. Take perfect coffee water and brew some batch with it. Take third wave coffee water, brew some batch with it. Tap water, make your own water, and brew some batch with it, and then taste the difference. And the reason I bring up batch brew is really hard to screw up. You don't have to worry about flow rate. You don't have to this and that, the variations in brewing. Or then even further, you and I have talked about this a lot, cupping, right? Yes. And cupping can be a little intimidating. That's why batch brew can be a little more approachable for this experiment. But how can you test a bunch of water that actually reveals the coffee more and then actually aligns with what you're tasting more? Yeah. So that's a very practical experiment that leveled me up, and that I think everyone should do. Another one is filters. I think if you want to run some experiments or read some stuff that Jonathan has written about, is different filter types that change how coffee is extracted. And I experienced this a lot in while prepping for Brewers Cup, is finding the right filter. Because, of course, we all know the fast filters, slow filters. There's so many different ones. But to use the right filter for the right coffee, especially with the right water, it's a game changer completely.
Yeah, I think you've sucked me into both the filter situation and the water situation. I can now look at water the same way anymore, whether that's for roasting, for brewing, but also filters as well. I mean, like that, it was a big eye opener the first few times I brewed with Barista filters, and to a certain extent I hated it, and then to a certain extent I was like, whoa, I did not know coffee could taste this way. But also playing off of that is maybe go out of your comfort zone and brew with a brewer that you're not used to brewing. I mean, like I've been brewing on the Oria for almost like a year now on some of the, like I've never brewed with it ever. I was very skeptical. But I don't know. I can't stop brewing with it now. And so, just playing with new pieces of gear, new brewers, experimentation, just comparing and contrasting and just seeing what do you like, even just understanding your preference, how these things work. It's all going to be beneficial.
Totally. Yeah. And like, as we wrap this up, I think those are a few things when I think about when I needed to level up, like, especially the filter game, that was big, especially when I went deeper into competition, is breaking things down to simplicity and making things very, very practical. There was a moment when, with latte art, like I was struggling a lot. I had no one to talk to about it. I watched all of the videos. I even created a playlist for my baristas to use. And I was like, dude, what do I need to do? And I remember seeing that Emily Bryant dropped a course. And I was like, yo, I'm always skeptical of online courses, but I'm like, I'm just going to buy this online course and treat it as if I was working with Emily on bar. And I make it so practical and basically take notes on the course, like take literally a class and as practical as I can get with it. And from flow rate, from the tilt of the cup to everything. And to be honest, like I sometimes hate to admit, but Emily's course allowed me to pour better latte art. And it was quite shocking. You know, that's not what I expected, but it helped me. It pushed me in that direction. Not only did it give me like valuable insight in how to do it, it just made me more hungry and more passionate. And like, it basically pushed me to to be way more intentional and to just execute, focus on execution.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, this is already an extended episode.
This is such a long one. Yeah.
So hopefully, you know, every single one of you who have tuned into this episode, I think there's at least going to be one thing that you can go and start tomorrow, start today. Or even that's maybe something you just need an attitude change. Maybe you've been like, man, I've been just going through the motions. Maybe I do need to stay a little longer, come in a little earlier, you know, pour a few extra pours, you know, a week or whatever it is. So any last words?
One is like, we didn't cover everything. So we kind of covered a very broad general things. Like we talked about espresso and latte art a lot. And I just want to clarify, like leveling up is more than just those things.
Yeah.
Remember the little comment we made about folding towels, hospitality, how you bring out a drink, how you bus tables. Those very small practical ways are an excellent way to level up your game.
100%. I'm glad you said that because that's a big part of it. That's also the flashy stuff that nobody likes to think about. So that being said, share this with a fellow barista that may need a little bit of a pep talk, some direction, some clarity. Thank you so much if you made it this far into the episode. Really, that means a lot to us. But friends, thank you. Hopefully you have a spectacular day. And as we always say, remember, reflect what's good.